Hi, I'm Feroz Khan, and welcome to Drag and Drop Low Code Unplugged, the podcast where we explore the game changing impact of low code in software development. Join me in insightful conversations with IT leaders and passionate low code enthusiasts who are at the forefront of this digital evolution. Together, we'll explore how early adoption of low code is giving businesses a competitive edge on a global scale. We'll discuss its impact on software development, dissect its role in transforming businesses, and uncover the ways in which it's reshaping career trajectories. So whether you're a seasoned IT professional or a curious enthusiast, be sure to tune in as we share success stories and unravel the mysteries of low code. Subscribe now and stay tuned for a front row seat to the revolution that's shaping the future of technology. So let's go. Hi Cal, how are you?
Good, Feroz. Good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for agreeing to be a guest. I know we've only met not long ago, but it's great to have you on.
Hey, great to be here.
It'd be great to start with for those who may not know who you are, a bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from.
Yep. My name is Cal Watson. I am from Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay, cool. And are you originally from there, or have you moved there,
Yeah,
or
so I actually grew up in Columbia, and then when I left school, moved around a bunch. I lived in Philly, Jersey, New York for a while, Charlotte, Raleigh, and then a couple of years ago, the universe just had us kind of come back to where we grew up in Columbia. Me and my wife and I were both from here.
So yeah, obviously you work at Mendix, so it'd be good to kind of before we kind of go into your current role at Mendix, it'd be good to learn a bit about your background, kind of where it all started,
So yeah, a little bit about me. I've been in technology, specifically software development, for my entire career. So about 20 years now. I started off in Java when Java was pretty new. Right with Java like 1.1, 1.2.
Wow.
That's a language we did at school. When I finished my master's, I went straight to Merrill Lynch, pretty much right before the financial crisis. I was at Merrill Lynch for about a year in the retirement technology department group, and then from there I did a couple of startups. So I built trading software for a startup in New York, and then I worked for a company that was doing like pre-public equity, so selling startups before they went public. So I spent a lot of time in financial technology, specifically startups. And then when I left New York, I got more into consulting. So I was doing custom software for clients, and that actually had me. That's kind of where I dipped my toes into low code, but it's a little bit different than a lot of people. So I actually helped build a low code platform for a customer of mine.
Oh wow.
So I wasn't actually using it. We actually were building the platform.
Yeah.
So it was kind of my first exposure, and then that kind of led me back here, 10 years later.
Wow. And I read on your LinkedIn you kind of started programming at around 12 years old. So where did that was there an influence in your life, or was it kind of just something you were interested in?
It was interesting. It was we got the family computer. Computers were new. This was 30 years ago. I think we dropped like $3,000 on like a 386, right? And I was, always as we began to explore that, I became the de facto person in the house to kind of help figure out the computer. Like, what's going on in the computer? How do you get this on there? I became tech support. That led me, and with Windows 3.1, you really had access to a lot of stuff you don't now. So you could get into DOS. You could. There was a quick basic compiler. You could edit the games that they had pre-installed. So that just kind of went down that rabbit hole at a very early age.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And you're at Mendix now. Can you talk me through kind of before you started working for Mendix? I know you said you kind of touched on low code. Low code's obviously gained a lot of traction in the last few years, and especially as someone who's kind of in the US, where I think low code started more on the European side when you talk about Mendix, for example.
Yeah.
Had you heard of it before you kind of started working for them?
So yeah, we had it briefly touched on kind of flavors of it, right? So like I think with Visual Basic, that's not exactly low code, but it was the first it was an entry into visual development, right? So it was like one of the first platforms you could build visual UI with. And then, there was some, I never really personally used any of the RAD tools, but we had them kind of in the periphery at Merrill Lynch. And then, you started getting into some of the web kind of form building and things like that. So you could see the value. But for me, I never really built anything in a low code platform until I came to Mendix.
Okay. And when you kind of, we're in the process of joining Mendix, you do your own kind of research about the business, and what was your kind of initial reaction?
It was I think if I had joined, or if I had started looking at this 6-7 years ago, I would have been skeptical. My initial reaction would have been skeptical
Yeah.
of the platform. Like I've always been a developer, right? I've always treated it as like kind of a craftsmanship, right?
Yeah.
And so, I really had kind of two things that made me pause, kind of throw out any preconceived notions about the platform, or about this kind of modality of building software. And it was really two things. It was one, I was at Dynamics with a colleague of mine, and he came over here about a month before I did, and really valued his input, really valued his kind of his background and expertise and things like that. So I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a serious look and take, and see what's going on. And then as part of the interview process, you have to go and build some stuff, right? You have to get happy with the platform. And, as I went through that process, I was like, well, shoot, man, this is actual software. You're actually building enterprise level software, and you're doing it in a way that's much faster than traditional coding.
Yeah. And, you are at Mendix now, so can you tell us about your role within the business and what you do?
Yep. So for the past, I've almost been here about 3 years, and my role has been up to about a couple weeks ago, actually, solutions architect, and I've been on the pre-sale side, which really means I help customers, understand how they can evaluate Mendix thoroughly, how they can get comfortable and where it's going to fit within their ecosystem, and talk about some of those initial ways to adopt the platform. I'm currently transitioning into more of a technical account manager role, which is less focused on, the pre-sale side of things, and more on, okay, we've got a customer, how can we make them successful with the platform?
Sure. And you're focused on financial services insurance, is that correct?
Yep. And then with my new role, it'll be less verticalized and more on an account by account basis.
Okay, fine. And when you were kind of focused on the pre-sale side, and solutions architect with these financial services and insurance customers, is there any kind of common challenges that you see that obviously when you go to all these meetings, you'll have use cases that you've done for other businesses as well. But is there common challenges that they talk about?
It's funny, the way when I go to like a bank or insurance company, the thing I want to find a couple of areas of, all right, who's emailing spreadsheets around, right? Like who's got a spreadsheet that has mission critical data that they're emailing around, right? Because that's some low hanging fruit. That's something we can come in. We can build a nice quick app to kind of manage that process, put in workflows around it to make it auditable, traceable, and more robust. So if you look at insurance customers and banks, that's always where I like to start, right? Because there's tons of places we can go, from commercial lending to property and casualty insurance. You throw a dart, you're going to find a department that's got a process that's managed by spreadsheets.
Yeah. And in the kind of financial services insurance sector, is there kind of one or two kind of customer stories you can share that, kind of you've gone in and, obviously Mendix as a platform has really kind of benefited that business?
Yep. There's a couple. As a company, we've got some notable ones around Washington Federal Bank, where we kind of revamped their whole online banking process. A couple of insurance companies as well, where we've done something similar. One of the ones that unfortunately didn't it didn't really get itself into production, but it was a great use case that I always was kind of sad about we didn't take further beyond the POC phase. Is I was working with a bank, and every month they had 60 people running data extracts, putting it into spreadsheets, email it back around to kind of manage their risk analysis and checklists, right? So within 2 weeks, we built a fully functioning POC to manage that entire process. That was pretty much production ready.
Yeah.
We didn't get it into production because from internal issues at the bank, but we would have been able to cut down and reallocate those 60 folks into different roles when we would have automated that process.
Well. And when you're speaking to these customers, is there certain features within the platform that you find it's quite common? Obviously, you're going to show them what the platform can do, and there's existing features, there's things that to look forward to. Mendix is updating the platform all the time, right? Is there certain features that you can highlight that really stand out? So especially for financial services and insurance companies, that when you're demoing or going through the platform, that really catches their attention.
I think when you're talking to someone who's really never seen a platform like Mendix and doesn't really know what to expect, I think when the light bulb moment kind of goes off is after you build your domain model, right? So in Mendix, like the domain model is the foundation, the application. And then from there, you can really just start automatically building all these things. So I can build all of the pages I need to get data in with a single right click. I can build the logic to do validation from those pages. And then what really kind of, I think, surprises people is I can build the API endpoints with a single click, right? I can build a REST endpoint to get data into my application that's running on and I can deploy it to a production server within 2 clicks. So the ability to just kind of start with the important piece, right? The thing that's crucial to your application, and then just have the platform build everything else for you is a really, really compelling kind of use case / feature for demoing, especially for folks who've never seen something like the Mendix platform.
And what's the kind of, especially for the ones who haven't seen the platform, what's the kind of common reaction, because I'm assuming when they've come into the room, they're probably quite skeptical, and then they leave the room.
And it's funny. It's funny. I think it's kind of split down the middle. There's always going to there's always going to be people who are going to continue to be skeptical, right? Mm. They're like, they're always. It's kind of like, there was this old urban legend around the history of the cake mix, right? Where the initial kind of release of the cake mix, people thought it was too easy and didn't buy it. So they added like this idea that I'm going to add an egg. And I think low code kind of suffers from a similar problem. Like people still think it's too easy. So you'll get that camp of folks who kind of think it's too easy. And then you'll have the converts who are like, oh yes, I can see this working. I can see how this is going to fit in. Let's go down and do a more thorough evaluation.
Yeah. And have you got an example, you can share where you've had someone who's, like you've mentioned, kind of been one of those skeptics, and then kind of, it doesn't have to be kind of after one kind of meeting, but, eventually falling in love with the platform?
I think, I've definitely done a couple of proof of concepts where, you're co-creating with your prospect, right? So you've got a team of developers. And there's definitely, it's hard to think of one specific, but there's definitely times where, you have to kind of pull them to the finish line, right? And you have to walk through every bit and byte of what's going on and really get in depth to kind of do that level of convincing. And then you'll revisit with that customer 6 months later, and they've built 3 apps on their own, right? And they're like, this is great, right? And then on the flip side of that, you'll often find people who, they just want to learn something new. This is the new shiny thing. They want to do it, and they'll do it on their own.
Yeah. And in these sectors that you were focused on, obviously security and compliance is quite a big thing, and how do you deal with that? And how, I'm assuming that's part of kind of when the customers are skeptical of how the platform will offer them that.
Definitely, and I think the first answer to that question is usually well, if you don't want us to host it, then we have 4 other options around where we can put your apps and data, right? So we can host it in a managed environment that's going to have these types of security constraints around it, or we can turn it over to you for you to run within your data center, right? So Mendix is a platform neutral deployment model. So we can deploy into something that's going to make you comfortable as a customer.
Yeah, it's good that that's usually there's options.
Yeah, that's usually the first answer, and then we go through around, how do we do encryption at rest? How do we do encryption in transit? How do we do, we have a very robust RBAC system where we can control access at the row level within your data. So there's a lot of things we can layer on after we answer that first question around, where are we going to deploy? Where's the data going to live? Where's the app going to live?
Yeah. And, as someone who obviously, you've been there for about 3 years, but obviously, like I mentioned, Mendix is founded in Netherlands and European, and obviously the customer base is a lot larger in Europe compared to North America. How have you felt, kind of when you're speaking to customers, just, even like you said, you're part of building a low code platform a few years ago. But
right.
What do you feel like these customers' knowledge level is when you kind of meet them and speak to them, especially because obviously traditional's been around for so long and it's not going away any time soon. And a lot of people obviously don't think low code is for small internal apps, so, what's the kind of impression they've got on Mendix rather than just low code?
I think from my experience, the brand recognition is growing. So when I first started, the majority of our intro calls were, "Who are you guys? What do you do?" And we don't see that quite as much anymore. But it's still relatively, there's still work to be done, right? Mm-hmm. There's still kind of experiences to kind of share to help kind of customers understand not only the value of low code, but how we approach that space.
Yeah. And when you joined, had the Siemens acquisition already been done, or was that after?
Yeah, this was post acquisition. It's something it's something we didn't leverage much with our financial services and insurance customers. It's always nice to kind of have your customer understand, your parent company and how they're involved. But a lot of the Siemens portfolio is not as relevant in that space,
of course,
as it is with some of the other verticals.
Yeah, I guess it's more suited that, like, manufacturing's a large one when it comes to Siemens. And the hottest topic for the last, God knows how long has been AI. Everyone's talking about it. Obviously Mendix has, incorporated AI features and Maya and things like that that's come out recently. I'm interested to know kind of, your view on AI and kind of how, there's this talk about, obviously, will AI replace low code and will it be needed? What's your kind of, one, what's your views on that? And two, when you're speaking to customers, are they saying something similar to you?
I'll work my way backwards here. When I speak to customers, AI is always coming up. Everyone's going to talk about it, and they want to understand, where it fits in. And from my perspective, and this is just purely my kind of thoughts on it, I use AI for pretty much every time I build a PSC, right? I
Mhm.
use some of the models to generate data, to give me text, to do things that are going to make the application better. And to me, the company that makes AI almost hidden, right? Like where it's in the background doing things that like an intern would do, or doing the things that take time but don't really need a software developer's skill set to do. I think the company that does that well within their product is going to be leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else, right? So like it's got to be it's got to be kind of hidden. Like I don't like for my example for generating data, I have to go into a couple different tools to do that. When the reality is, I don't want a context switch. I want everything within my development environment.
Yeah, sure, sure. And, especially like, what we've found is obviously, especially with the AI feature, a lot of people I speak to, they say obviously for junior developers to kind of rely on AI, it doesn't really allow them to understand what they're
Right.
doing, so can cause more problems in the future.
Yeah, I think with AI, it it's not about, you don't want to rely on AI to build your secret sauce, right? You don't
Mm,
want to like rely on AI as the main driver behind your product. But if you can rely on AI to increase your productivity as a developer, that's a huge win.
yeah. And, when you're kind of, been dealing with these customers and, I think with low code, and I think even talking about the US, for example, the Mendix developer community is not very as strong as other regions, and
Right.
do you get customers commonly saying to you, we're struggling to hire people, obviously we've now got your platform, we're going to obviously train people internally, are they sometimes struggling to find people, or also struggling to even convince, the existing developers that, hey, we're now going to switch to low code?
Yeah, I think I think there's a little bit of that in both cases, right? I think I think one thing that's kind of different in the U.S. than, and we talked about this a little bit, than in Europe. The way software is typically delivered in the U.S., a lot of companies rely on contractors, right? And a lot of
Yes.
companies rely on independent folks to kind of be available. And that, if you look at something like Java or .NET, there's tons of those people in the world,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
That's a pretty easy lift. But like independent Mendix developers, it's not so much. And I think that's something that'll grow, especially with a company like yours to
Yeah.
kind of help build that process.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's something that will grow. And then I think you'll also see, um, and we kind of put some emphasis around this around the university programs. I
Yes.
think you'll see more junior developers kind of embrace low code as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's definitely, even from our kind of point of view, it's a lot easier to, if you focus on the more kind of graduate level, it's easier to convince them versus
Yep.
the more 5, 10, 15 years .NET Java
Yeah.
guy who's just, you know, isn't
Yeah.
going to change their
And I
ways,
get it.
Yeah.
And I get it, right? Like, as a traditional developer, it takes a long time to be good at what you're doing,
Yeah.
right? It's like, say you spent 5 to 10 years really sharpening the stone, right?
Yeah.
And then the idea, it's it initially can be a tough pill to swallow, to say, all right, I want you to, kind of put that off to the side and go double down on this platform,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And that being said, I'm keen to kind of know, if what would be your message to kind of the people in the traditional space who are skeptic about low code, and if you were in a conversation, or if you've had a conversation in the past that you can refer to kind of try and convince someone to try low code.
Yep. Um, I think what you have to remember, especially with a platform like Mendix, right? You're still building enterprise software. So at the end of the day, whether you know Java, .NET, or anything else, the thing that's going to important and that's going to make your app successful with a low-code platform like Mendix is your software development skills. Like, can you come up with the right abstractions in your data model? Can you build optimized backend services via our microflows? So I think that is a thing to consider as you kind of investigate the low-code platform. The other thing I would say is get your hands on and try it. Like, everything is available for you to go out and try. Like, just go give it a shot. But I would say that with the caveat is you've got to invest some time, because it goes back to this idea, you're still building enterprise software and you have to learn the kind of nuances and the differences, right? Because there are differences in how you build an app in Mendix than Java, for example. And you have to invest that time up front to actually understand and truly be successful with the platform.
Yeah. And do you find, because obviously you're someone who has that traditional background, and when you're talking to customers, it's a lot easier for you to kind of talk about that transition, because you're someone who, okay, you're not a developer, you're not a low code developer, but obviously, you work with low code, the platform. Do you find for you personally, it's much easier to relate to the customers' pushbacks, but also to try and convince them, because your own career has been through a similar journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had to convince myself, when I first started, like, I really did. And when I looked at the platform and I was kind of going through those initial build outs, I think there's really a couple of key areas to focus on. There's Mendix makes it easier to build, right? But with software, the initial build really isn't the heavy lift, right? The initial build out, that's really getting you to the starting line. It's everything after that really takes a lot of time. It's the rework you're going to encounter because you didn't have your business partners co-creating with you, right? It's the deployment. It's the can we scale this? It's the project management. It's all of those other things that in a big enterprise organization take time and resources. So if you can kind of condense that into a single platform, then you're really, really going to show that value in faster delivery.
Yeah, yeah. And you touched on, obviously you're moving into a new role, now. Is there kind of any other kind of future developments that we can look forward to that you can share in the US area?
I think with Mendix, and I think it goes back to something you touched on. We release often. Like, yes. We release monthly,
yeah.
And each one of those releases have pretty major features in them. Like,
yeah.
What I'm seeing is we've recently released our kind of chatbot within the platform. We've done a lot of refactoring on the front end, which is going to make some of the deployments as you're testing faster. And then we've improved the experience when it comes into we're steadily improving the experience around private cloud. So that's a big thing for us in the US, and it's really we've had a lot of just kind of user experience as someone who would deploy apps, improvements in that area.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me. It was great to kind of hear your insights and your views on things, and especially someone who's kind of come from the other end and now kind of
right
here and trying to get not really convinced, but obviously you're dealing with customers who have a similar kind of mindset to what you had, and the whole goal of this podcast is to create awareness and speak to people like yourself who maybe once would have been skeptical, and now
exactly.
you're on board. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Cal.
Thanks, Feroz.
Thank you for listening to today's episode, which is brought to you by iTrack. We are a leading staffing firm that solely specializes in supplying both contract and permanent low-code professionals to organizations globally. Navigating the niche landscape of the low-code market requires the best talent, and we recognize its critical importance for our clients. Whether you're a company looking to strengthen your team, an individual seeking the next career move, or someone entirely new to the world of low-code, we're here for you. Our extensive experience and in-depth market knowledge enables us to quickly pinpoint the ideal candidates while offering expert advice and support at every stage of your low-code journey. Reach out to us through our website or connect with me directly on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to assist you. Thank you once again for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another insightful episode. Until then, take care.